Shall we call this meeting to order since it is now the appointed time, 2 o'clock? So we will call the regional planning, the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Governing Board for Thursday, May 23rd to order. And with that, we'll ask for the roll call.
Jenny Breckus, Naomi Dewar,
Here.
Bonnie Weber, Marsha Burke-Bigler,
Here.
Charlene Bybee, Devin Reese, Donald Abbott,
Here.
Ed Lawson, Vaughn Hartung,
There.
Jeannie Herman,
Here.
and non-voting member Katie Simon Holland.
So we have a quorum, and would, as those members, there are several that did not say they were here who are coming, we know, so please check them as present when they arrive. And with that, we will do a salute to the flag. And Mr. Moreno, would you lead us in the salute to the flag, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, I'm looking for approval of the agenda. Any changes in the agenda?
There are none, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And next we go to public comment. I don't have any public comment, so we'll ask the clerk to call.
I have Mike Kazmierski, followed by Tammy Holdstill.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Kazmierski. Nice to see you.
Morning, Madam Chair and the entire group. I would like to just start by saying what you're embarking on is something that this community needs more than ever. And for those who've heard me speak before, you know that housing, specifically affordable housing, is our greatest challenge as a region. I consider it the #1 priority for economic development. Our board has taken this very seriously. We've been part of the executive committee to move this project forward for what seems like over 2 years. It's been a while, a lot of meetings, a lot of work. The product and the recommendations are amazing, but they're like many other reports. They don't do much if we don't take a team effort and really act on it. So I implore you, I know all of you personally, and I know this is important to you. Somehow we need to act as a team. It's not just this issue, but many others to get this done. No one agency is going to solve this problem. This is really a team effort, and I want to specifically thank Kim for her work. She has been a leader in the production of this product, certainly Enterprise, and you'll hear from the Enterprise team as well. There are recommendations here that some people may not be comfortable with out of the blocks, and I would say this is a 10-year plan. It's something that we have to grow into. Some things we can do quicker than others. But first of all, I'm proud that the community is taking this on. And I would, again, ask that the more we can work together, bring our resources to bear, and address affordable housing in this community, the better, because we're at a time now where the problem is getting worse and the solutions are not yet there. And even something like this took us almost 2 years of work and will take us a lot longer to fix, so we're looking at the sooner rather than later. So I'm a proud supporter of this, a fan of Kim and the team there, and certainly you can count on Edon to be behind whatever you decide to do to address this challenge. It's not going away, it's just going to get bigger, and we want to be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kazmierski. Next.
Tammy Holdstill.
Tammy Holdstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. Of course, the water's still there. I'm still here. A lot of you I saw earlier today. Others I've seen during the week this week. And before you were a handout was given to you on a plan that we've been working on, trying to figure out after the April 29th joint meeting, how we move this forward. This idea of sitting still and waiting for the water to evaporate is not happening. It's not going to evaporate anytime soon, and the HESCO barriers can't last forever. And there's a lot of money being spent between $200,000 for tiger dams and $70,000 a month for pumps And there's a lot of ideas being thrown out there to elevate Lemon Drive so that we have pumps for the rest of our lives. And I don't think that's the way we should be going. I think it's time to look at what goes into the lake and control what goes into the lake, not try and control the boundaries of the lake. And then to spend more, after being at a meeting today where $75,000 is being spent to see about taking affluent to Long Valley Creek to Honey Lake, and another $100,000 to change the floodplain, besides another $125 that Washoe County found somewhere. You know, $225,000 being to remap to tell people that they're in a floodplain is, at this point, a lot of money being wasted and nothing going to the physical things that need to be done, which is your infrastructure, your sewer plants. One needs to be totally demolished. It's in the 100-year floodplain. The other one needs to be A+ so the water can go anywhere. We've all seen how Pyramid Lake has not met its what it used to be its history high or normal level. It's time to figure out how to get the water there so that there's good storage there, instead of making up all these other things. There's ways to do it. There's umpteen different ideas out there, but we need to get the water off the lake. Winter's right around the corner. Last summer was a hot year, over hot year actually, and only 8 inches went off that lake. 8 inches. Right now it is higher than it was in 2017. What's going to happen next winter? It's going to go over the HESCO barriers? Or one of the HESCO barriers is going to fail? Those are the things we need to be looking at. We need to move. We need to stop spending money on words, as I call it, doing searching this, doing that, and come up with a plan. So the plan you have in front of you is something that I think is a step forward, so do the residents, and we'd like to see something physically done and money put in permanent fixes, your infrastructure, your sewer plants, not the Band-Aids. The Band-Aids don't do anybody any good, and it costs everybody a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holtstill. Next.
That is all for this item.
Okay, so that's all the public comment we have. If no one else wants to come forward at this time, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. And with that, we will move to the business of the day. Madam Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 5A for possible action is presentation, update, and possible action regarding the Truckee Meadows Regional Strategy for Housing Affordability from Enterprise Community Partners. And I am actually going to kick off this item and then turn it over to Chris and Ann from Enterprise. So today we are fortunate to have Enterprise with us to present their findings and suggestions on housing affordability in the Truckee Meadows. Enterprise has previously completed a needs analysis and community profile for our region and shared these results with the board at previous meetings. Today, Enterprise will be sharing the results of the work of many months, many brains, and many hands to develop a strategy, potential tools, and a timeline options for our community. The myriad number of options listed in this document means that there is choice for the jurisdictions and implementing agencies. The next steps include working together as a community to determine what strategies can work for everyone. The RPGB is being asked today to hear this presentation, accept the report, and provide any feedback desired to Enterprise Community Partners. Additionally, the board is also being asked to consider the following actions, including including identifying a lead entity to drive implementation, and that's something that was supported at the executive leadership team meeting just this morning. Following today's governing board meeting, the next steps for this process will include the draft document being reviewed by Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County managers' offices, and will be brought forward to each of those entities' boards, the two councils and the commission, for a vote. The executive leadership team that met this morning recommended this approach. Okay. Finally, the RPC also heard this item last night. They accepted the report and provided overall support for this strategy, while also recognizing that this is in the formulative stages and that there's still some work to be done. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Ann from Enterprise.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, welcome, thank you. Chris Kizzy, Enterprise Community Partners. Excited to be here with you today to present Housing Our Future, to the Truckee Meadows Regional Strategy for Housing Affordability. On behalf of Enterprise, I want to thank Truckee Meadows, Healthy Communities, Sharon Zadra, Ken Robinson, TMRPA, the Regional Planning Governing Board, Nancy Brown of Schwab Bank, and many of the others in this room that have contributed their ideas and thoughts to this effort to bring this plan to life and hopefully for the region to take action on it. This has truly been a great partnership, and we value all of the progress that the region has made towards this effort. Our presentation today will focus on an overview of the needs and the challenges facing the region around affordable housing, as well as the many actions the region could take to alleviate some of these challenges over the next 10 years. Just a little bit more about Enterprise. We're a national nonprofit intermediary that's focused on not only developing affordable housing, but also bringing capital and policies and solutions to that. And I think you'll see some of our expertise around the policy and those solutions, as well as the capital side, reflected in many of the actions in this plan. And just a point, long before Ann and I started coming here a little over 2 years ago, Enterprise has invested in the state of Nevada through low-income housing tax credits, as well as new market tax credits. Just to remind you a little bit about our timeline, this process started in January 2017, where Schwab Bank brought us out here to hold a one-day affordable housing forum, which had over 100 participants and about 6 inches of snow, a lot of great conversation, but the one takeaway we had from that conversation was they wanted action. Every stakeholder in that room wanted to take action. They were willing to go through a planning process, but they wanted to see action as a result of that. And you'll see a lot of the framing of the recommendations and policy solutions and other actions the region can take are action-oriented, and they're realistic and they're time-bound, where the region can take action over a period of the next 10 years. So our process began with establishing a planning structure, recognizing there was a lot of expertise in that room coming from the Housing Forum. We wanted to capture that local knowledge and that expertise, so we established a planning structure to really inform and guide this process, and it has done so over these past 2 years. And that really helped us hone in on those key challenges the region was facing. And so a lot of that feedback and a lot of that input in the data analysis and that work is reflected in the community profile that Kim mentioned. And we also worked with that planning structure to design various strategy focus areas to make sure we're honing in on those important areas that matters to the region, but also making sure we're addressing those key core housing challenges the region has today, as well as into the future. And those strategies, focus areas, and actions associated with them were developed over time and now are codified in the strategy roadmap document that we've shared with you. And you'll see a lot more narrative, obviously, behind a lot of those things, but they are reflective of the same conversations we've been having over the past 2 years. So community engagement is a strong part of this process, and we believe it's a strong part that informs a much better, not only planning process, but a much better strategy document. And so we've had over 18 working group and executive leadership team meetings. We've had 40 one-on-one meetings with elected officials, industry groups, and other community stakeholders. Over 130 responses to surveys, over 115 participants in community conversations and focus groups, and many presentations to not only RPC, but RPGB as well. And we've incorporated all of that feedback into the document that you see before you. As you can see, we compiled a cross-sector of stakeholders, both including city managers and county managers, to really inform this process, as well as representatives from the state and other key stakeholders. And that has been a really valuable contribution to this work, to make sure we're grounded, but also make sure that we're having those tough conversations and bringing those tough actions, as Mr. Kamirsky mentioned earlier, that maybe we can't tackle today, but certainly we can tackle in the future. Working with that planning structure, we established a vision, not only for this planning process, but also where the community wanted to go over the next 10 years. And so working with that planning structure, they developed a vision that all residents of the Truckee Meadows should have access to a continuum of safe, accessible, and affordable housing options in neighborhoods that offer access to opportunity and a high quality of life. And I think that really set the North Star for us, and we're really where the Truckee Meadows region wants to go relative to affordable housing. And we also came up with core principles to make sure that the actions that we're developing and the policy recommendations and other capital solutions and recommendations are reflective of that vision. And so we made sure that every action was measured against these core principles to make sure we're staying true to that vision that was established by the planning structure. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ann.
Good afternoon. Ann Jordan from Enterprise Community Partners. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes with you here doing a little bit of a recap of some information that we have discussed a bit with you already. So starting from the community profile, which is the assessment of housing needs and capacity. Then I'll give an overview of the strategic framework that's kind of the newer piece of this document. And then Chris will dig in on some of the details with you all. So up first, there are about 5 key housing issues that most of the strategy was really designed around. I should note that while a lot of this is based off of local data examined for the whole region, these 5 issues are true in almost every community in which we as Enterprise are working. A lot of this is driven by some major macroeconomic trends that are just changing the nature of the housing market and the deepening need for affordable housing in communities across the country. So up first is this shortage of affordable rental units, particularly for households earning less than half of area median income. That's really compounded by the fact that the housing supply has not been changing as quickly as demographics have been changing, which is just changing the calculation of supply and demand. So we're seeing the population aging as well as an influx of millennials who are seeking a different type of housing product than is more traditionally on the market. We also have known that nationally, there's been wage stagnation in comparison to rapidly rising housing costs. We know there's been some great economic success in the region, particularly recently, but even as the wages have increased, the housing costs have increased even more. So keeping up with that is really difficult in this time, which makes it even more important to preserve the affordability that already exists in the community. But with that comes challenges in terms of maintenance, making sure that older housing is of good quality, even if it is more naturally affordable. And then also making sure that where you've already invested dollars to make sure that housing is affordable with subsidies, that those remain affordable in the long term. And finally, making sure that households are not facing housing displacement. We know that there's a rising number of households in the region that are both low income and paying more than half of their income on housing costs, which makes them very vulnerable to housing displacements as their housing costs may rise. So some daunting challenges, but there is some great strengths in the community that have been here since the very beginning of this process that we knew could be leveraged to really tackle these challenges. So this capacity assessment really informed all of the recommendations. So recognizing where the community is today and the many ways it can grow in the future to really tackle these things. So I'm not going to get into all the many bullets on this slide, but just wanted you all to know that this is the approach that we took in terms of thinking about the strengths that existed in the community, the opportunities that are here in the region, as well as threats that may be able to be turned into opportunities over time with the right approach. And then looking at where there were weaknesses, in particular thinking about how the current tools in the region were really limited relative to these needs. And so making sure that the actions in this strategy are all built around this analysis to make sure we're setting the community up for success over a 10-year period. So with that, I'll launch into the strategy roadmap piece, arguably the more exciting piece, looking forward to the future. And so this is where we really were able to dig in on that question around access to opportunity. So we benefited, as Chris mentioned, from a lot of community involvement. And I think this was one of the most salient reasons why people were coming to the table, was not just more housing for more housing's sake, but looking for housing in strong communities that offered access to good jobs, transit, quality education, health outcomes, economic stability. And we had some really energized conversations around that we've been able to bring to bear in the targeting recommendations that I'll talk about in a minute. So the strategic framework is centered around 35 different actions. So these are some choices for the region to make. 10 of them are cross-cutting in nature, so they are really designed to build capacity and expand that toolbox so that that new capacity and those tools can then be leveraged to address those more targeted housing needs. And we have 25 actions that are built specifically around those targeted needs, and that's what Chris will be digging into a little bit more. So these are those 5 strategy focus areas. You'll see they mirror really closely those 5 housing issues. That is intentional. One is not more important than the other. They are numbered so to differentiate them. But we want to make sure it's clear that all 5 of these components are critical to addressing those needs. If we're pursuing production alone, but not preserving what you already have, that's not really getting at the gap. So it's really important. It's intense to take them all on, but with the sequencing and looking across how these can support one another, there's opportunity for real impact. So to kind of zoom out on those 35 actions, when we look across them, this is a summary of the different tools and programs that are discussed. Some of these tools are already in play in the region. Some have begun moving forward as a part of this planning process, and not just waiting for this plan to come forward. Some are tools that were already in the region, but we're suggesting maybe using in a slightly different way to see more impact. And then thinking about the kind of resources that you can channel into targeted programs to address some of these more specific needs. As I mentioned, we thought a lot about how to target these. We know that there are limited resources in the region today. You can't just spread them all evenly, equally, and expect to see real change on these issues. We want to make sure that you're investing your dollars and your time and resources in a way that's going to yield great impact and achieve the kind of outcomes that community members have discussed with us throughout this process. So we took a deep dive on every census tract throughout the region, recognizing that no one-size-fits-all approach was going to work. And so we took a look at housing stock characteristics, affordability, investment conditions, as well as access to opportunity, as I mentioned before. And so these are, 4 categories of indicators, but about 10 to 15 specific data pieces underlie each of these categories, and allowed us to think about the kind of considerations that might be implied by each strategy focus area, so that as the region pursues implementation of any of these actions, there's a clear path for how to prioritize some of these decisions, make some of these tough calls, and the maps that are provided here and in the document illustrate what that looks like to try to prioritize among some of these different conditions. So with that, I will turn things back over to Chris.
So as Ann mentioned, as the region's continuing to build its capacity through some of those cross-cutting actions, you'll start to see how we start sequencing some of these targeted actions to then leverage some of that increased capacity. And so you'll see some timelines associated with many of these actions. And that's our current state recommended timeline, is when you should start thinking about addressing some of those relative to some of the capacity that's being built in the region through some of the cross-cutting actions. And so as the region grows and as the market changes, you'll be able to adjust and adopt changing timelines depending on those conditions. And so it's meant to be somewhat flexible in that area. And so I won't touch on every one of these actions, but I'll try and hit some key ones that I think are going to be not only catalytic, but also in some cases I've already started a lot of groundwork in getting those things done. So the first targeted strategy focus area is really looking at how do we support more production of affordable rental housing in the region, particularly for those at 50% AMI and below. And so one of the things that we think will be tremendously impactful is that regional housing trust fund conversation that we know is advancing in the region now. Having another resource to then support broader development efforts, leveraging more tax credit dollars in the region, I think is something that would be not only supportive of the targeted population, but also allow you to factor in access to opportunity as you start to make those project selection criteria. We also know in talking with and doing that capacity assessment that Ann mentioned is that there's limited nonprofit development capacity in the region. And so looking to RHA to build up their development capacity to pursue development, having another mission-oriented development entity would be extremely beneficial to the region to then also kind of increase the production side. But you have to have resources to support that production. And so the Regional Housing Trust Fund is one way to do that. The other thing is that we know that there are limited resources in the regions. There's not an infinite number of dollars. And so you also have to have a conversation about how do you incentivize market rate developers to also contribute affordable housing to the market. And so one of the things the city of Reno asked us to look at is inclusionary housing and how that might play out in various submarkets throughout the region. And so recognizing that there's some work that has to be done there and some additional analysis that has to be done. But how do you start to layer in some incentives to incentivize market rate developers to participate in the development of affordable housing and include some affordable housing in those projects is something that the region can take action on as well. and mentioned the need for a more diverse housing product in the region, recognizing that predominantly you have, single-family housing predominantly throughout the region, and that doesn't align necessarily with where the trends in population and demographics are heading. And so how do you start looking at ways to address some of that diversity and include some more diversity in the housing product? And so looking at maybe developing a pilot program that supports the development of diverse and lower cost housing products to introduce and demonstrate that there's a different housing product in the market and that it can be feasible to develop. And so maybe partnering with the housing authority to introduce some different types of housing products to really looking at maybe that missing middle housing product that can be brought to the region. And so recognizing that that's going to take additional resources, looking at how do we leverage Section 108 loan financing, which is a program from the CDBG program where the city of Sparks and the city of Reno can borrow against their annual CDBG allocation, roughly approximately $12 million to do mixed use, mixed income development, something that we also know is a different housing product that is being demanded in the region as well. We also know that we can't have a conversation about affordable housing without also talking about homeownership opportunities for low-income households. And so recognizing that there's a tight rental market currently right now, how do we help those households that are currently renting but maybe could be ready for homeownership with a little support by expanding and increasing access to homeownership? And so dedicating some resources to support broader homeownership efforts throughout the region is something that I think will hopefully help soften some of the rental market constraints right now, and also help uplift low-income households that are potentially ready for homeownership by giving them and removing some of those barriers right now that they have. And so we talked about the region had a down payment assistance program at one point in the past using home dollars. And so maybe partnering with the state's down payment assistance program to provide additional subsidy for low-income households by establishing a regional down payment assistance program is one way that you can offer a subsidy to help reduce some of those barriers to homeownership. But also recognizing that there's still going to be a barrier to homeownership for some folks. And so how do you start looking at the community land trust model to understand how we can keep or remove one of the biggest barriers to homeownership, which is the cost of land, from that equation and lower that cost of homeownership for households, and also maintaining that housing product in the affordability space for a long period of time. And we can't have a conversation about affordable housing without also talking about preservation. One thing that we detail in the report is that there's going to be thousands of units that are potentially going to expire and lose their affordability restrictions due to the tax credit expiration. And so how do we identify these properties, number one, but also develop strategies to make sure that those properties, as best as we can, remain in the affordability space. And so coming up with tools like PACE financing, which we know is something that's moving through right now, to provide financing to not only address some of the large-scale systems that are needed to preserve and lower the operating costs of those properties in a way to keep them affordable as well. And also, how do you look at leveraging your code enforcement infrastructure to identify properties and landlords that may be problematic for the region? And how do you work with them by offering them some assistance to rehab those properties that are not in good quality condition and offer them some subsidies so that they can maintain those properties in the affordable inventory and work and establish a relationship with those landlords? And then finally, looking at protecting residents from potential housing displacement. As the market continues to change and the economic growth continues to happen, hopefully in the region, we want to make sure that the households that currently reside in these neighborhoods can have an opportunity to stay in those neighborhoods as those markets continue to change. And so how do we look at leveraging some policy tools as well as some financing and subsidy to support households from being displaced? And so looking at a preservation incentive overlay zone where you look at maintaining a certain level of affordability as the market continues to change. These are policy tools that the region could employ to make sure that folks aren't displaced as the market continues to change. And one thing we know that is as this effort grows, that some folks are still going to have a gap between where their income is and where the current rental rates are. And so maybe looking at expanding a tenant-based rental assistance program, leveraging the housing authority's infrastructure to provide a rental subsidy for those households to have a broader choice of housing throughout the region is something that the region can take on as well. So some of the immediate actions and priorities that were identified, not only through the planning structure, but as well as some of the community meetings we've had, and I think Kim touched on this earlier, identify a lead entity and build their capacity to guide implementation. this strategy roadmap needs someone to drive it. It needs someone to really focus on implementation, not be solely responsible, but to be the one that's leading the effort. And so identifying that lead entity is something that's a critical first step. And we know those conversations are ongoing that I think will be really catalytic to really help move this forward in a positive direction. The dedication of the funding for the Regional Housing Trust Fund is something that not only will support developers, but also build the capacity within the region to take on more development. And I think that's something that would be a much positive step forward. Also applying for Section 108 loan financing, as I mentioned before, that's a valuable resource that the region could apply for and get access to in a roughly about a 3 to 6 month period. And so bringing that resource to bear to do mixed income and mixed use products is also a signal to the community that there's not only resources available, but we're seeking additional development capacity to help us in this effort. And then obviously, it may be in the medium and long term, looking at how do you introduce some incentives to support market rate developers and including affordable housing units in their projects. And so moving forward, we ask that you provide your feedback, and we will certainly incorporate that feedback as we begin to finalize this plan, as well as support the coordination and collaboration that's going to be needed to really move this forward in a collaborative effort and a regional approach to addressing the issue. So supporting the executive leadership team, particularly the 3 jurisdictions, including the Reno Housing Authority, and identifying that lead entity to drive implementation. We're going to come back and hopefully present this to both city councils as well as the Washoe County Board of Commissioners, and really make sure that there's some agreement and some collaboration that's going to move this process forward. And with that summary, we'll take any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, anybody have any questions? All right.
So you laid out some steps, and one of them was like identify a lead agency. I mean, how are you proposing we tackle each of these steps? I mean, each thing that you said, is there a path forward? Are we just supposed to figure it out here sitting at this board, or are there work groups going on that are going to bring forward proposals to us? Or
Yeah, so one of the things we've been working with is the planning structure, particularly the executive leadership team, on how to, one, identify the lead entity and what capacity that lead entity and resources that lead entity needs to be successful in being the implementer. One of the things we detail in every action that was on in the presentation is really detailed not only why you need to do it, but how you can do it. And that's where we want the feedback, not only from this group, the continued participation of the executive leadership team to really refine and tweak where needed, but really to support implementation as outlined in the report.
so what are you looking for from us today?
I think you're just supporting agreement that this is something that you guys are going to support, the collaboration that's been started.
This is more of a check-in than a decision-making for you, or you don't need guidance on these issues you've laid out?
We will take any feedback and guidance you have
Okay.
on anything we've presented. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dewar. Anyone else? Mr. Reese?
Thank you. I want to ask about sort of an intellectual question. That is, everyone on this dais up here supports making every effort we can to work towards affordable housing, market rate housing, all of us. There won't be one up here who says that they're not interested in that. My question, I suppose, is can you point us to communities that are doing a really awesome job with it, so I can go out and read about what is community X, Y, or Z doing and doing well that we might pattern ourselves after. Because again, most of the material in the report is things I think we intuitively believe to be true. Some of us are having a hard time figuring out how to get there or what the steps are, how we do it. But none of us are doing that for lack of a heart or desire to do it. Our region is committed to the people who live here, and we want to do it. Give us some of the tools that you think are available, and the one specific I'm asking for is point me to some communities that are just doing a bang-up job with housing.
Sure, and I appreciate the feedback and the question. One of the things we detail in the community profile portion of this document, I know we weren't able to address that today, is we lay out a comparison of the Truckee Meadows region to other regions throughout the country to show how they've been able to create a broader housing toolbox, both resources and policy tools, and where the region currently stands today. And that's been our benchmark to say, if you want to bring yourself up to that kind of, I don't want to call it a best practice because it's very specific to markets, but where other regions are with addressing this challenge, we've said, and I think one of the slides we covered is, here are some of the new tools that you need to bring to bear to address this issue. And we also do case studies of other regions in other cities and communities that have used these tools and how they've used those tools. So that's really detailed in the community profile portion.
Which city can I look at?
So we detail several in the community profile. I know we looked at Denver and some of the recent things that they've been doing. I know there's different market dynamics in Denver as well. The Sacramento region, we always look at Seattle because they're very nuanced and have a lot of history with addressing some of these challenges. We also look at some East Coast cities like Charlotte that are doing some real progressive things, and I think that's something that we've integrated, not only through some of our recommendations and actions, but some of the tools we're recommending, because we don't want to start the region off where these communities were 10 years ago. We want to help you guys get to where and learn some of the lessons that they've already established and learned with some of their policy practices and how they've designed programs and various tools and subsidies. And so a lot of that information is really detailed in the strategy roadmap as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I would just like to thank you for the amount of information in this report is pretty remarkable. And I think sharing that, with the community and people, our stakeholders that are involved, some of the things I think I knew, I think a lot of us kind of know, especially if we've been here a long time, and then we've watched even the last few years and what's happened with our population, with the housing, jobs, with the whole region. Some of it we know, but there were some things that were surprising to me, and a lot of your data, a lot of those numbers, looking at the 3 jurisdictions and kind of where we were percentage-wise, and those graphs, really provided a lot of insight to kind of, I think, help guide us as we look at what decisions that we need to make. And I would agree with Ms. Dewar on really how do we do that. Like the land trust, I think, is, I would fully support, but how do we go about doing that? And I think agreeing with Mr. Reese on looking not only at other communities, but communities that can mirror as close as possible what we are experiencing here, because not everyone in the country, there's affordability that I hear. National League of Cities, that was a huge, huge topic. Cities, large, small, across the whole country, cities that are stagnating, and yet we have a city that has this incredible growth coming faster than we can build. Right. And so cities, I'm hoping that we're looking at cities, and I would think we are, cities that are experiencing the same type of challenges of rapid growth, shortage in the housing, payrolls that aren't meeting that. I mean, we're not unique, I know that. So, but I do appreciate what you've put together on the community profile and that information. I think that's going to give us valuable information as we move forward to make a decision. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bybee. Commissioners, anyone else with a question? Seeing none, let's go to public comments.
I have Sharon Zadra, followed by Nancy Brown.
He's tall. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Again, Sharon Zadra, Executive Director of Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities. My message to you begins and ends today with a sincere thank you. Thank you for your consensus 2 years ago to address affordable housing as a priority in our regional planning. This community, many are here with us today, resoundingly united to team with Enterprise and TMRPA and TMHC to thoroughly evaluate our conditions and to develop this roadmap, a toolbox for your consideration as we move forward for its adoption and action at your appropriate action at your jurisdictions. Thank you for the sharp insights and critical analysis provided by the Reno, Sparks, and county managers and their expert staff members. They, along with countless community leaders, guided, vetted, challenged the conditions, the recommendations from day one to today. And thank you, too, to many of you who personally gave us insights along the way. TMHC's mission is founded on collaboration and advocacy for issues impacting our community. As you heard, literally hundreds of leaders, subject experts, concerned businesses, and even the most needy in our community united, recognizing that we face serious housing issues and bold action is needed. This team will remain with you as you move forward at your respective entities. Implementation will be challenging, but not without huge reward. This is indeed a 10-year direction, and we are so fortunate to have the Reno Housing Authority to expertly lead the way, coalescing with many other leading agencies and organizations. Thank you to this community for funding this nearly 2-year process. This roadmap was initiated by Nancy Brown and Schwab Bank, who teamed with HUD and Ken Crater for that snowy January meeting. TMHC then rallied volunteers to raise some $200,000 to support the 3-phase process, with Schwab's generous support along the way. Most of this funding was received from local businesses, banks, and realtors. The only public funding came from the Reno Housing Authority, the State Housing Division, and the Washoe Health District. I've shared the dais with many of you, and I know what it takes, scars that it takes to take a stand on issues that don't always have a comfortable solution. But there is nothing comfortable about the situation that we're in today. Again, this group of people, the community, will remain to help you take bold action. And as the RHA chairman told us earlier this week, we've got to get it right. We're here to help you do that.
Thank you, Ms. Zadra.
I have Nancy Brown, followed by J.D. Klippenstein.
Hello, I'm Nancy Brown. I'm the Managing Director for Charles Schwab Bank. Charles Schwab Bank is headquartered in Nevada. We've been here 17 years. We're the 12th largest bank in the United States, and I say that because we have a commitment to this state and this community. I've lived here 40 years. I've lived in Reno. I've lived in Sparks, and now I live in rural county out in Palomino Valley. And this is my home, and this is my family's home. And affordable housing, because I do community development, I could see that our community was being, it was just not right. It's not right to have our people not be able to live in affordable housing, something of 30% and across the board. Many of you, just like me, I know everyone has experienced the issues of affordable housing. I have a daughter that's in Pennsylvania but can't come home because she can't afford to live here because her income's not going to be able to afford it, so she can't come home. How many of us have children living with us? And how many seniors are being displaced? And so 2.5 years ago, I was sitting at a meeting and someone says, well, let's get Nancy Brown. We have an idea around affordable housing. And I sat there and I said, you know what? We have lots of ideas, but are we working together? Let's start working together. And we've worked with enterprise communities as Charles Schwab Bank for 17 years. We do investments into their loan funds. We invest in their tax credits, and we provide grant funding to support their work in San Francisco and in the Reno and now the Las Vegas community. And so we're hoping, and we hope that everyone can work together to see this to an end. Everything in this plan might not be everything that we all agree to, but we can agree to a plan, and we can our jurisdictions can take what we can from each of them and implement them. But at least it's a roadmap. It's a regional roadmap, and we need to work together on this issue. And I want to thank all of you up there. I know this is not an easy job, and I want to thank the community because this was a public-private nonprofit collaborative that was initiated by the community, not by the jurisdictions. And so we're looking for jurisdictional support, and we thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
I have J.D. Klippenstein, followed by Michael Moreno.
Good afternoon. My name is J.D. Klippenstein. For the record, I am the Executive Director of Action, which, as many of you know, is a local organization that engages faith communities and other stakeholders in grassroots community organizing and advocacy work. It's been a deep pleasure to be a part of this planning process, this strategic process for the last couple years. And I'm here today to implore in the strongest possible way that you would fully endorse, and commit to implementing this strategy, this roadmap. I want to thank the Washoe County Commissioners for already taking the first step on what I think is one of the key components of this plan by establishing an Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or Regional Housing Trust Fund, on March 26th of this year. Action and our many community partners over 2018 mobilized nearly 1,000 community members to directly engage with our county commissioners. We kept showing up, and they responded in a powerful way by creating a powerful tool that is desperately needed in our community. So already this is more than just a plan that's going to sit on a shelf. Even if you didn't know, we've already started to implement part of this strategy, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm looking forward to the next step of finding the funding for that. The reason that 1,000 people showed up on Tuesday mornings throughout 2018 was because this is a crisis. To give you a scale, part of the community profile is going to say that the estimate is that we are currently 11,800 units short for affordable housing or affordable rentals for low-income folks. At the rate that we add that kind of housing in this community, it would take us a century to cover the current gap. This is a crisis. There's no other word that we could use, but it's about more than bricks and mortar. I like to say that this is a moral crisis. Who are we becoming? Who can we become? Are we going to be a community that trades economic development for human dignity? I think we're a community that can do both, but it's going to take hard decisions, and it's going to take strong leadership. So I know that you want the community that I want, an abundant community where everyone can live and thrive, and this strategic roadmap is a way forward. So I would encourage you to not get stuck in trying to find the silver bullet, because there is no silver bullet. What we truly need is community and political will to make this happen. And no amount of ideas is going to get this out, is going to change our community unless we and you commit to doing that. So today I ask that you would continue to be the leaders that we need you to be and commit to making this plan a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klippenstein. Appreciate you coming. Mr. Moreno.
Michael Moreno, followed by Grant Sims.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Governing Board. For the record, Michael Moreno, RTC Public Affairs Manager. I'm here to express the RTC's support for the TMRPA's regional strategy for housing affordability. The RTC has been involved with the agency's process to develop a regional strategy for housing affordability. Supportive of this initiative, the RTC recently began an affordable housing study. Our study aims to develop a blueprint for transit-supported affordable housing in the Truckee Meadows. The study opens the door for RTC to explore opportunities for joint development under Federal Transit Administration guidelines for improved access to transit and affordable housing, enhancing transit-oriented development readiness and connectivity for people and to places. The information and work being done by the TMRPA and Enterprise will assist us as we develop the study to identify strategies and solutions for affordable housing in the region. Earlier this week, Assembly Bill 270 was passed by the Nevada Senate and is now headed to Governor Sisolak for signing. AB 270 will allow an RTC in a county whose population is less than 700,000 to dispose of, sell remnant parcels we own which are left over from road projects that have been completed. RTC Washoe does not have this authority at this time as provided to other jurisdictions and NDOT. The sale of these remnant parcels may provide an opportunity for affordable housing and within close proximity to transit service. We will be working with public and private partners, affordable housing advocates, and developers as we advance the study. The bill also authorizes us to operate microtransit, which is a multi-passenger vehicle, such as a van, which is dispatched through a digital network or app. A public meeting to introduce the RTC Affordable Housing Study to the community will be scheduled to coincide with the rollout of the TMRPA's Regional Strategy for Housing Affordability. If the board is interested, the RTC welcomes the opportunity to present more detailed information about the study, our preliminary research, and the location of the remnant parcels at a future Regional Planning Governing Board meeting. We look forward to this collaborative effort with TMRPA and partner agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno.
I have Grant Sims, followed by Kristen McNeil.
Good afternoon. First of all, honorable chairperson and members of the governing board. My name's Grant Sims, and I'm not representing anybody except myself. I'm recently retired, but did not retire from the community. And so I'm dedicating a lot of my time outside of being with my family to this very issue. And I want to commend you and Schwab Bank and many of the players here and stakeholders for coming forward and beginning to address this critical crisis. I support the initial findings of this study primarily for two reasons. There's a lot of good ideas in here, and some will work and some will not work, but you're at least going to try something, as FDR did. Try something, for God's sakes. But the issue of having a select entity, one identified entity to actually carry the ball, I think is critically important, not only because they have that scope and that focus, but they're going to develop a scope of work and timelines, and you're going to be able to hold them accountable, and they should be held accountable. So it's going to bring together and integrate a lot of these great strategies under one roof, and I think that's a good step. The other point, and it's in the study, but I think it needs to be strongly emphasized, is that we're dealing with availability in all submarkets of the real estate market here, not just low income. And I don't think you can fully address the affordability issue by just focusing on low income housing. You have to acknowledge the fact that submarkets do relate and do impact each other. So if you have a shortage in product up in Saddlehorn, for example, on that price point, that's going to force buyers to look at least expensive property, which will then generate more competition and demand and drive up prices in that submarket. And it works throughout the entire spectrum, from Montreux all the way to Cold Springs. So thank you. I think this is a great first step. I want to commend the players again for coming forward with this, and I truly hope that you will move forward and hold that single entity totally responsible and give them the support and do your part as elected officials from your jurisdictions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
I have Kristen McNeil, followed by Eric Novak.
Good afternoon. Kristen McNeil. Some of you know me with one hat. Today I speak welcomely for another hat that I wear, and that's as a board member with Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities. As a founding board member, TMHC is a nonprofit 501c3 organization with the mission to align diverse community leaders to advocate for the region's capacity to ensure an inclusive and sustainable healthy community. That's our mission. We work in three areas: affordable housing, behavioral health, physical activity, and nutrition. As you have heard today, the need for housing for those that are making 50% of AMI is critical in our region. The stress of unaffordable housing and unstable housing contributes to poor health outcomes in these households and negatively impacts our children and our teens' ability to have and achieve equitable education. And that's where I come in, and our community must come in. We know that having affordable, stable housing makes for a better community, makes for a higher quality of life. Affordable housing that is safe and stable should not be something that is out of reach for anyone in our community. Affordable and stable housing should be a right of our families and our individuals who work hard, and for our entire region. This strategic roadmap is a long-term effort, and it is a step in the right direction. It won't be easy, but there is a collective momentum, as you have heard today. Everyone in this room has worked hard to get to this point. We are behind this issue. We must be behind this issue for our families, our children, and for the sustainability of our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McNeil.
I have Eric Novak, followed by Sherry Jameson.
Hi, for the record, Eric Novak, I'm president of Praxis Consulting Group. I hate public speaking, but I feel really important to be here to support the planning process. Praxis was involved in many meetings over the last 2 years in creation of the plan. I want to be here to say we support the plan. It's part of a lot of activities going on with affordable housing right now, and we're really excited by the momentum of the Senator Rallied Intercession Committee on Affordable Housing and the potential of a new state affordable housing tax credit. Right now we have over 1,000 units of new affordable housing being built, many of them in Councilwoman Jora's district, as a result of some changes that the state made in terms of creating a gap funding program to make bond projects work. So we've been involved in affordable housing planning for many years in the community. We authored a barriers study in about 12 years ago that inventoried some of the barriers to affordable housing development in Washoe County, and a lot of those unfortunately have not been addressed, and we're sort of revisiting them again and sort of saying, you know, these are the things we need to see big changes in our affordable housing inventory. We support the recommendations of the roadmap, and you know, those are more money for affordable housing, land, reducing regulatory barriers, more affordable housing finance tools to make to allow for projects to go forward. And I also want to say that we work with the Reno Housing Authority very closely and think they'd be an ideal candidate for that leadership role of helping move the roadmap forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Novak.
I have Sherry Jameson, followed by Nick Cheeker.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sherry Jameson with the Food Bank of Northern Nevada. As many of you know, I was CEO for 30 years and recently stepped back to work only part-time, 30 hours a week instead of 60, as you all do, I'm sure, working on a project that is building a partnership that will provide two-generation services to families to build their stability so their children can be successful in school. Having enough to eat is certainly part of that process. However, one of the biggest challenges for families today is buying groceries and paying the rent. With our partners, we serve about 92,000 people every month. That's all of the agencies we serve, the people that come to them for food and direct services that we provide. 5 years ago, 58% of those folks had to choose between food and shelter every month, regularly. Today, almost 2/3 of the people we serve have to make that unfortunate choice. The Food Bank strongly supports the plan that has been presented today, and we work together with many people in this room to consider the needs of our community. We strongly request your support of this plan and that each jurisdiction will individually support and contribute to its successful execution. And we'll be right here beside you working for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jameson.
We have Nick Cheeker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Nick Cheeker, and I am the Community Engagement Officer with the Community Foundation of Western Nevada. And I wanted to first start by thanking some of the many people who are involved with the creation of the regional strategy for housing affordability, and to commend the work of enterprise community partners, Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, and some of the individuals who have really been involved in the process, including Sharon Zadra, Kim Robinson, and Nancy Brown, along with many more people. The Community Foundation really started looking at the issues of housing affordability over 5 years ago when we started our Youth Network initiative directed at the needs of youth who are homeless or aging out of foster care. And we realized that there were already housing issues at this time, during that time, but we weren't experiencing the housing crisis that we were today. And I wanted to point out some of the parts of the plan and really commend some of the collaborations that have already been happening. As you know, the Community Foundation established the Community Housing Land Trust in April of last year, and we're nearly complete with our first project, the Village on Sage Street, and are very grateful for the cooperation that we've had with the City of Reno, along with many other private developers and with Volunteers of America for making this project successful. And we plan on expanding our work with affordable housing through the Community Housing Land Trust. But I wanted to emphasize one point that another housing advocate has really talked about before from J.D. Klippenstein, and I think he said it best in the sense of that when we're looking at the issues of housing, we can't just continue to look at this from project to project of what new development is happening. We really need a regional strategy for this, and I think this is the role where TMRPA comes in. And the Community Foundation supports this plan, and one of the things that we have recognized through our work with affordable housing is that really expanding this access to affordability is not a handout, it's a hand up. And we know with all the different tools that are in here, it'll be a way that it's not only the moral and the right issue to do, but it'll continue to make our community a better place to live. So I encourage the support of this plan, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cheeker.
We have two more people wishing to speak, but I believe first, Madam Executive Director has some written comments.
Yes, she does.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first card I have is from Sharon Chamberlain, representing Northern Nevada Hopes as the CEO. Northern Nevada Hopes supports adoption and implementation of the Enterprise Housing Plan. We have over 2,000 individuals that have experienced homelessness in the last 12 months. This plan must be implemented to ensure our community is supporting all individuals increasing health and wellness. And our next card is from Mary Ingolstad, identifying, I support the regional strategy for affordable housing. I have a card that doesn't have any name on it, so if you filled out a card saying that you supported the regional strategy for affordable housing, I would encourage you to meet with the clerk and submit your name to that, but thank you for who provided that. And then finally, I have a letter here from Steve Atroth, who's the administrator for the State of Nevada Housing Division, and he identifies, dear board members, the State of Nevada Housing Division would like to commend all of the entities involved in the production of Housing Our Future. This includes Washoe County, the City of Reno, the City of Sparks, the Reno Housing Authority, the Regional Transportation Commission, EDON, Renown, Enterprise Community Partners, TMRPA, and Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, and the many community partners who have been involved in its creation. Over the course of 2 years, collectively, we were able to create a strategic housing plan which can be applied effectively to ease the housing affordability and availability issues which currently exist in the Truckee Meadows. This strategic plan can and should be used as a guiding document for the next 5 to 10 years. Previous studies have been completed, but were deemed ineffective by the onset of the Great Recession. With the recent diversification of the Northern Nevada economy, we believe this plan will be relevant for many years to come, regardless of the economic conditions which the area may experience over the next decade. Growth causes additional issues, one of them being housing instability, and this plan addresses many of the solutions available to policymakers concerned about housing. With 35 specific actions which can be taken by communities, organizations, state and local entities, and through the thoughtful deliberation and implementation of those actions, we would anticipate the reduction of the housing affordability and availability issues the area is experiencing. Please know the State of Nevada Housing Division stands ready to assist in those efforts and will remain a contributing partner in the successful completion of the actions recommended in Housing Our Future. Thank you for your time and attention. Sincerely, Steve Atroth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. I appreciate that. And it's nice to know the state's on our side. Okay, you have two more, you said?
Correct, yeah, we have Ken Crater, followed by Amy Jones.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for your support of this effort. Back in fall of 2016, when Tony Ramirez, Nancy Brown, and I met for lunch to talk about Enterprise Community Partners and hear from Nancy what a fantastic organization this was, we quickly realized that this was something that could probably be doable in this community. And as Chris mentioned, in that day in January 2017, when there was heavy snow on the ground, more on the way, we had over 90% of the people that we invited to this meeting show up and spend almost the entire day talking about how to build and move this effort forward. We had a second follow-up meeting in March with, I think, close to 60 people. Between two of those, 150 people. And I just want you to know that this is not an enterprise community partners plan. This is a community plan. And they pushed us really hard to make this a community plan. There's a lot of times where we'd be basically staring at them like, well, come on, you guys know what's the answer. And they go, no, you need to come up with this. It's your community, not ours. You need to figure this out. So this body of work that they put together is a tremendous toolkit. And that's one other thing we wanted to make sure, that it wasn't another study to sit on the shelf, that we actually had a toolkit, something that we could implement and move forward. So with that, we went and raised, I think, close to $300,000 in this community to fund this effort. That was a monumental task in itself. You all know from campaigning and how hard it is to raise money. But we did this, we achieved this. But I want to say that, you know, the most important thing, two things I want to say today, is first of all, the discussion that we had on the structure. It took us a long time to identify a structure for this process, everything from working groups, advocacy groups, and leadership groups. And frankly, there was a lot of people that didn't want a political body involved in this because they were concerned that nothing would ever get done. But at the end of the day, we all agreed unanimously with 100% consensus that the regional governing board had to lead this effort because you are truly the leaders of our community, and we absolutely made the right choice on that. And then the other thing that I think is most important is there's collectively thousands of hours of effort involved from all the people that we've had in this organization, and we're not going away. I think there's probably a lot of concern on the part of the city and county managers and the key staff. This is not going to be easy, but I am very confident that just not the people behind me in this room, but all the other people that were involved, that we're going to continue to help everywhere we can with your staff and your commissioners to help move this thing forward, because it's so important to our community to solve this crisis and allow people to live healthy and sustainable lives. And again, I thank you for all your efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crater.
We've actually received one additional comment card, so we're going to have Kevin Dick next, followed by Amy Jones.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dick, and I am sorry I missed our meeting.
Well, good afternoon, and no apology necessary. I'm Kevin Dick. I'm the District Health Officer for the Washoe County Health District, and I apologize. I just arrived because we had our District Board of Health meeting this afternoon, but I believe that Commissioner Burke-Bigler, you chose the more important meeting to attend today. And I know you've heard from a number of speakers, so I won't go too long, but I just wanted to thank the Governing Board for your partnership with Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities and Enterprise on this endeavor to develop this regional strategy for housing affordability. Housing was identified as a #1 priority for our community from our community health needs assessment and is incorporated as a priority in the community health improvement plan that the District Board of Health has approved. So this study is one of the components of our strategy through that community health improvement plan. I think it lays out a number of great ideas for developing our toolkit and for addressing the problem that we have from affordable housing on the low end up through workforce housing. We all understand how important housing stability is for the health and the prosperity of all in our community, and so I hope that you will move forward with this. I think we're we don't want a plan that just sits on the shelves, but something we can move forward with as a region through each of the jurisdictions to try to improve our ability to successfully address this problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dick. Appreciate seeing you here.
And lastly, we have Amy Jones.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Amy Jones, Executive Director for the Reno Housing Authority. As Nancy commented right from the get-go, we have all sat in meeting after meeting after meeting with the same goal in mind, that we want to address housing, but we're never on the same page. You know, we all have great intentions. The RHA has been involved throughout this entire process, and I'm humbled by the confidence and support of all the agencies that identified the RHA should be the lead agency. The RHA's mission is to provide housing, affordable housing for this community. And we recognize the need. We hear it every day from the families that we serve. And our region is changing. It's growing, and we understand the role of the RHA needs to change to support this community. The RHA, we've already started growing. You know, we just had our current development for our groundbreaking, so we want to do more. We understand that we need to do more. The RHA's Board of Commissioners met with Enterprise at our meeting last Tuesday. We had a great meeting, great discussion, and we will be moving forward at our June meeting to have an agenda item for the board to vote on the RHA being the lead entity for the regional strategy for affordable housing. This is a 10-year plan. It's not going to change overnight, and we want to start with the capacity building of the Housing Authority. And the RHA can't do this on our own. We need the support of this entire community, and that's why we're all here today. We all support this community and the families that we're serving. And we're excited for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. Appreciate it. Nice seeing you. Okay, that's it?
That is all.
Okay, that's the last of our people who have signed in. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward and make a statement? All right, seeing none, based on that, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Commissioners, anybody have comments, additional ideas, things they want to add? I do have a couple of things. I just wanted to make a point of saying I don't support rent control under any circumstances. I do, however, support the building of affordable housing and the reduction of regulatory barriers that are stopping us from that. And so what I would like to ask, and I'm not sure who I asked this of, maybe I asked this of my chairman, my commission chairman, because he is the planning guru on our crowd. Yeah, no, I'm not looking at her, I'm looking at you. But one of the things I'd like to know is what are some of those regulatory barriers that we need to look at and address from the county's perspective, and I hope the cities would do the same thing, but I know there are some, and because I hear that from developers, and so I would like to see those. That's one of the things I think we need to address immediately. What are we as a government doing to put up a roadblock to block the building of affordable housing or workforce housing or whatever, we want to call it, entry-level housing or low-income housing, whatever we're going to call it at that level. What are the barriers that we ourselves have on our books that are creating a problem? And so I'd like to see that, and I see that you're leaning forward, so you're going to answer me and give me all kinds of wisdom. Commissioner Hartog.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know whether I'm going to give you any wisdom or not, but it really comes to density and then transit. Because adding density is of no value if you don't have coupled with transit. And so those are the two main things that the county faces in terms of those hurdles.
Yeah, I understand both of those, and I'm getting a little too close to this microphone here. I feel like I'm yelling at you. I understand both of those, and I agree with you. I think those are two really clear ways. But I'm wondering if there aren't some things within our planning codes that also require additional hoops to jump through and that kind of thing that we might address and look at. So maybe that's something we could take back to our planning gurus and see if there are things out there that we can immediately start looking at to address as we start putting this whole plan together.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to add that you are right on point, but we've already established a Reno Housing Task Force to focus on the very things you're talking about, development issues, permitting, are there roadblocks, and in fact, I believe it was 2 weeks ago at our meeting, we initiated development of an ordinance changes to address those things. So the group, I joined about a year ago, but the group's been meeting for some time, and it is now resulting in, development of these ordinance changes that we're going facilitate development, speed up housing. So I think you're right on point. I don't know what the other jurisdictions are doing in that, but I think it would be a useful exercise at every jurisdiction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Ms. Stewart? Yes, sir.
For me, I definitely would like to bring it back to the city. Obviously, we're not going to make a decision on this today, but I'd like to bring it back to each entity, and maybe then our entities come together and we come up with a across the board, yeah, that's a great idea, we like that, or that absolutely won't work for us kind of a deal, and make it work that way.
Good.
Because we do need to move forward. You're also going to have to figure out a funding formula for that trust fund.
Yes.
I mean, those are big items to ask and get accomplished.
Yeah, it's not just the roadblock, it's also the funding formula to get a funding set up. And that's something where all three entities are going to have to really look at our own budgets and see how we do that.
So I'd like to see it go back to the cities, let our staffs look at it, go through our code and say, look, we could change this, this, and this. And maybe Reno doesn't have the same problems, maybe county does. And then just one other thing that goes for me, and this is nothing against the Reno Housing Authority, but to make that a little more inclusive, could we call it the Regional Housing Authority?
I think that's a valid point, and I know that the two city managers in the city and the county manager have been meeting with the team, and there's a couple things with it. Not only should it be called the Regional Planning Authority, but it needs to have representatives from the county and from the city of Sparks, because currently all of the representatives who sit on the board are appointees from the city of Reno. And so that's clearly something that would need to be changed to expand it. And I think that's not a political issue. That's an issue of, we are here in a region that we're working as a team. And so that's a very valid point, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
I know we use the Reno Housing Authority in Sparks too, but
Yeah.
it would be nice to have some representation from our communities. And
Good.
a more generic name.
Thank
I
you.
didn't want to be Sparks Housing Authority.
Okay. So, anything else that anybody wants to bring forward? And I was very excited to see that you guys said, yes, you're definitely going to take this to each one of the three elected bodies and make sure that you make a full presentation to each of them. And I think that's very important to do. This should not just be our managers, but this should be all of us sitting across the board looking at this issue. So thank you for that. Yes, Commissioner Herman.
I think one thing that we could each do as an entity would be to eliminate building permit fees and that sort of thing. And I don't know if that's already written into anything, but
Yeah.
I thought.
Well, permit fees are certainly an issue that will have to be looked at, I think, as we move through this process. I don't think there's any question that that's something we're all going to look at, but we'll see how that goes. Yes, Ms. Bybee.
The other thing I'd like to mention, and I'm sure all of us are looking at it, is we really don't know what the legislature is doing.
Exactly.
On a whole, but on the housing issue. For affordable housing, they've got several bills that are there. They've also got a couple bills that could undo affordable housing. So really, I think, and we're close to the end, hopefully, and looking at what comes out at the end and how any changes at the state level that they do pass and the governor signs factor into what we're doing, that we can take advantage of or that might hinder us, or whatever the outcome is could have impact on us, positive or negative. So I think we've got to be keeping an eye on that, which I'm sure we are.
Thank you, Ms. Bybee. Anyone else? Okay. We really are not, we don't need a motion to approve this report. We just are accepting this report. And I think we've given some direction to Kim, to you guys, to move forward, and we are all going to work on this. I think we're all supportive of it.
Madam Chair, I'd just suggest checking in with legal counsel in terms of accepting the report. Would you prefer a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Motion to accept the report and thank all the people that participated in developing this report.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any additional comments? Yes, Mr. Abbott.
Just thinking, I'm all with you, Ed, about going back to our own jurisdictions. But how about a nice concurrent meeting with all of us together, and we can talk about this after we already talked at our individual entities, and have a group? Because I think what we do in Sparks might be different than what we do in Reno or the county, and I would like to know what everyone else is kind of doing. What are you guys changing, so I can answer those questions when, because we don't just get Sparks questions or Reno questions. We get them all over. So that'd just be my own 2 cents.
I think that's a valid point, yeah. So I know we are looking at according to the managers, we're looking at trying to set it up so that when they come back, they could do a presentation to Sparks, one to Washoe County, and then one to the city of Reno in the 3 consecutive days that we're all meeting. So we'll work on all of that. Yes, Commissioner Hartung.
And one other thing that I think that we've left out of the mix here, something that we should have our staffs look at, is transitional housing. Not just affordable housing, but transitional housing that can get people from a point from maybe even being close to being homeless to a point where they can get into something that is more affordable through whatever means. And we've talked about this on certain parcels that are around town that are belong to the Flood Management Authority and et cetera. So I think that there's maybe some opportunities there, but transitional housing also needs to be in the conversation.
Good point. Good point. Ms. Spivey.
I just wanted to double check on our suggested motion in the package. It also has 3 other bullet points. I don't know if we need to include those in the motion, confirming the need to identify a lead entity, confirm support for collaboration between the 3 local jurisdictions and others to identify a lead entity, and determine the recommendation that this region would like to implement, and 3rd, recommend that a time frame be established within which bullets 1 and 2 will be accomplished. Is that something, would we need to clarify that, or just move to accept the motion at this time because we haven't made decisions on the other 3 items? We haven't made those determinations today, so would just move to accept?
I'll just add one thing. When Amy got up with the Reno Housing Authority and mentioned that they were going to have their board vote on whether they should be that, I wondered if there should be a preliminary step where we all said, yeah, they're the right people, they should do it. And I do think they're the right people, but I don't know that anyone here, which it seems like the right place, might have made that kind of had that conversation, made that decision. So I didn't want to, get too into that, but, I'm fine with, I guess I'll look for direction to our executive director and see what she thinks.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
So the conversation today was support around doing those 3 things together in the future, and the expectation would be that having those conversations would happen at the jurisdictional levels but really that this board today says, and we recognize some of the most important next steps are to identify a lead agency,
go.
to identify the time frame within which we do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, for any kind of plan to mean anything, you've got to have someone that's going to lead it, have a time frame for doing it, and work together to get it done. I mean, those are just sort of 1, 2, 3 givens. So thank you for clarifying that. I think I'll just stick with the motion to accept the report for right now.
And is that okay with the seconder? Okay. All right. Any additional comments? Mr. Reese?
Thank you. I wanted to echo Councilman Abbott's comment about all of us sharing what we're doing in some more direct fashion. And the reason why I think that is true is because, for example, I'm very interested to know more about the housing trust that the county has done. It's something that I followed at a very superficial level through the news and through watching some of the discussions about it. But this is something that I think is, number one, to be celebrated, the fact that it has been created. I don't know if money has gone into it yet or where it's coming from or what's going to happen, but I think it's something worth exploring. And like Commissioner Hartung said, too, we all sit on other boards, and all of these things start to gel well. Remnant pieces of property, commission's decision to create the housing trust. These are part of the reason why I assume that Enterprise went out and did all of the stakeholder meetings, because they were gathering the bits and pieces. But I would like us all to be talking about what we're doing. Another example for Commissioner Hartung is the Sage Street property is clearly one of the examples of that transitional housing. It's intended to be a short-term opportunity, not a long-term housing solution. And Ms. Jones and I were at the groundbreaking the other day for the Willie J. Wynn apartment complex. All of these pieces are churning through different jurisdictions. We're all needing to be in the same place and have the same conversations. And of course, that's why one lead agency must be, selected, anointed, I don't know what the right word is. And like Councilman Lawson, it has to be differently named than it is currently named, without a doubt. The last thing I will comment on, and it was just something that as I sat here and listened to the presentations, but also thought about the board, I observed something that we also have not acknowledged, and perhaps it is lost on the day and the topic, but 8 of the 12 of us who are sitting up here are women. 4 of them are men. It seems to me that women in this context are leading the discussion around housing. When families are housed and healthy and well, families succeed. And so I just think it's worth acknowledging that, we've acknowledged that our legislature has a majority of female members on it. I think it's worth acknowledging, and I acknowledge here that I observe that to be the case here, and believe that may be perhaps why we're getting something done.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Thank you, Councilman Reese.
Nothing?
All right, any additional comments? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Can we
All
clap
right.
for you guys? I mean,
Good job. Thank you all.
Madam Chair, item 5B for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding schools, projects, including projects of regional significance, school facilities plans, and/or regional plan policies and map. This item starts on page 205 of your packet, and we will be turning this item over to Norm Azevedo, legal counsel, to lead this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Norm Azevedo. Beginning on page 205, there's a memorandum that outlines the options available to the board. Specifically, it outlines what the RPC recommended to this body. We discussed it briefly back in April of this year. And then it also discusses options available to the board. On this topic of schools and the interaction or interface with the regional planning, I was asked to present this matter to you because depending on where we embed the respective rules in whether it's the comprehensive regional plan, whether it's as a PRS, on a prospective basis rolling forward, this body may or may not see the matters come back before it unless it hits the right area. Specifically, just from a general discussion, a project of regional significance is defined by statute, but is also defined by the guidelines adopted by the Regional Planning Commission. Assuming whatever rule this board deems appropriate would be embedded into the guidelines of the RPC, if a school were to come forward that met the criteria for a project of regional significance and the RPC found it to be in conformance, this body would never see that again. That would be the end of the journey for that particular project if it was deemed to be found in conformance. Alternatively, it wasn't found in conformance, and there are processes available to get into this body, but in general, I think it's reasonable to anticipate that a PRS, a project of regional significance, doesn't typically, over my years, 20 years, come to this body for consideration. On this particular topic, the board members individually and as a group have expressed interest in making sure they get to see these particular matters. Another alternative that the RPC brought forward, and I think is a good suggestion, the scope and nature of what this body ultimately wants to put into it, it would be to embed policy plan provisions in the comprehensive regional plan to address what constitutes a school that needs to come forward. This body has that authority to make those particular determinations. If it's a school within, for example, 2 miles of a regional or a jurisdictional boundary. Is that the type of school that would have to come forward? Those are all criteria that have to be determined by this particular body. And the staff and legal needs direction as to what the board as a whole wants to be brought forward. The RPC made that recommendation, and they also suggested having a PRS guideline amendment brought forward as well. One is not exclusive of the other. You can make a recommendation to amend the plan. You can also refer the matter back to the RPC for a consideration of a PRS amendment to their guidelines. And so it depends where you put the policy and the goal as to whether this body will see it again or not. One of the suggestions that was addressed by the RPC was the Washoe County School District prepares a facilities plan. It's a master plan for one of the big jurisdictions, but a facilities plan in this particular context. And that plan comes to this body for a conformance review. That is something that you will see. And in that facilities plan, it was contemplated that the schools, potential school sites would be addressed and brought forward in that particular facilities plan. That is a possibility, that is a suggestion. The school district has brought that forward back in 2012. They have committed to bring it forward again. The comprehensive regional plan and the policies you put in it can set forth the parameters as to how and when that facilities plan comes forward, so this body can look at it into the future. And so without specific guidance from the board, and attached to my memorandum are 2 other documents. One is a brief outline of the previous discussion and some of the comments from each of the board members. That's attachment 2, and attachment 1 is a memorandum from Lauren Knox, who's the planning side of this, and she addresses the process as well. But really from legal's perspective and from the staff's perspective, what we're looking for is specific guidance as to what the board as a whole wants. What do you want on this topic? And then depending on what you want from a prospective looking forward, what do you want to come back to you when a school is proposed? So we're looking for guidance in that regard. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you so much.
Councilwoman Dewar.
Thank you so much for calling on me. I initiated this, I don't know, it feels like 9 months ago or something, a year ago. And it wasn't, I want people to understand, it was not about Wild Creek School. It was about that I've been on council going on 5 years. And schools have become a pivot point almost at any size. And why? Often because of transportation-related issues. If it's a public charter school, for example, they don't have public transportation. All the parents are driving there and dropping off. There's not a lot of walking to those generally. And so wherever they're located, it became a challenge. Number 2 was larger schools. I have a number of high school, Galena on one side, Damani Ranch on another, but both kind of on the edges in my ward, but they also touch on to the county. And so it became, I became aware that this was just generating a lot of controversy at the individual jurisdiction level where we had to deal with it. And so that's why I just asked to explore these items. I've thought a lot about it, and I'm very interested to hear what other people have to say. But I've looked at all of the options that our council have offered, and I see one here that I like, and once we've heard from everybody, I'd like to suggest a way to go forward. So I'm just really interested in hearing what other people have to say. My goal is just better planning before it's at this drama crisis point, at our jurisdictions. That's really what I'm after. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dewar. Are there any other members of the board who would like to make a comment or do we want a presentation from the school district? What is the pleasure of the members of this board?
Well, I mean, we have, our school board president here, and
yeah,
I'd love to hear from her.
Thank you, Ms. Dewar, and thank you, Madam Chair, Katie Simon Holland. I think it's really important for you all to be able to consider all of the options, and we certainly would welcome information being provided to update. This is a continuously unfolding issue, and I think there's been great discussion about it. The school district is very anxious to be participants in having better planning earlier in the process. And I think everyone benefits from that goal. And I appreciate, Ms. Dewar, your having brought it up in the first place. And I know it related to a charter school, actually, at the time you had originally brought it up. But I think we definitely want to be participants. We are participants already in trying to make sure that we're phasing school construction with where the jurisdictions need us to provide schools for the housing that is being developed. So we'd certainly welcome the opportunity to have our folks share with you some thoughts.
Okay.
Thank you for
Councilman
the
Reese.
Ms. Simon Holland, I guess I want to ask a question that's related because you've raised the question of how it interacts with funding. I have the privilege now of serving on the Capital Funding Protection Committee. And so in that vein, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what are the economic costs to the kinds of choices that we would be asking to be made? Because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to avoid is not the planning. The planning is super important. I hope that this body and its staff, who has done so much work to give us these options, will have the opportunity to comment upon them. But also from your perspective, what are we talking about relative to that committee's oversight of the money that this community has pledged to pay for capital improvements of schools?
And thank you for that, and thank you for serving on that committee. It's a very important committee to us, and we know that you'll be meeting in the next couple of weeks on June 6th. There is an impact financially if we have decisions that are make or break, if you will. If we have gone forward with site development, if we have gone forward with permitting, if we've gone forward certainly originally with site acquisition, all of those things, and then have to stop that process, that has a huge cost to it. We're now looking for the next sites for our next round of school construction, but all of these things we have to calibrate because we can't build a school before it's needed in an area. But we also have to make sure that it's there when it's needed. So it takes us a year and a half, 2 years to build just an elementary school. But all of the work that comes before that, including the development of traffic plans, including the development of site work, including all of the work that has to happen with the community involvement, we want to know that that project is going to be approved before we make all of those investments. And that's why we've been very supportive and very happy to participate in the facilities planning process. And if you want to add more conditions to that facilities planning process, we welcome that because we want to be your partners in fulfilling the educational needs of the people that are in your jurisdictions.
And Madam
Does
Chair,
that help, Councilman Reese?
Councilman Dorr.
and and that is where we get caught sometimes, because an example that you brought up, which was the public charter school, we had 60 kids sitting in front of us saying that Reno City Council doesn't believe in education. And further, we don't believe in arts education. I mean, I myself am the liaison to the Arts and Culture Commission, and of course I embrace that. But I thought it was not a very good place to locate where you can't park anywhere within blocks of the school. There's one way in, one way out. We're having to put roundabouts, traffic lights at $1 million. I mean, all of these kind of impacts. And I want to mention, too, that when I originally brought this up, it wasn't just about schools. I brought up a project that was going in my ward, which is the construction of the regional DMV, right in the middle of, a professional office area, which has very challenged traffic. RTC is now doing an entire study on South Reno's traffic problems. And there have already been deaths near there on roads, bike challenges. And of course, the state didn't consult with Naomi Dewar and say, hey, how would this work with your ward, and your people? And would this fit in? I mean, it's not near a major highway, byway. It's not easy to get there. You have to drive into a neighborhood. So, I mean, it wasn't just about schools. It was just about better type of planning. And I know the state doesn't have to come get our permission for anything. They own a piece of land. They can do what they want. So, and the university, same thing. I mean, the university is exempt from our local planning process too, quite a bit. They do their own master plan. So, and then lastly, one of the options here talks about, continuing to have an adoption of the facilities plan. And here's where my challenge is. As pointed out, the facilities plan for the school was developed and approved 7 years ago by this body. 7 years ago is like an eternity in our world that is so quickly changing, and our whole community has changed in 7 years. I mean, 7 years, 2012 was a very different time than, 2019. So I don't think that that option is like a good solution to me, because I don't even know that it was adopted. Like I've only been in office 5 years, and that's somewhat, I'm in my second term, but I didn't know it was adopted. And I think when we do adopt these big plans, often we don't know what the detail is. You're adopting like 15 schools at one time, and you haven't done ourselves the level of detail that we do on any development that comes before us on every, there's like about 12 or 15 items of factors that we have to consider in feasibility, not just transportation, but all kind of other things. And we don't do that if we just do it in a facilities plan. I mean, we just go, okay, we got the 10-minute presentation, and we're approving the plan, and we don't really know what that means. And then people can go, you're relying on it at the school district saying, well, that's in the facilities plan, it was approved. So just to cut this a little shorter, what I think right now, and especially given Mr. Reese's comments about money and your response, is that I think that the Regional Planning Governing Board should take an option, the very last option that is laid out by council, which is to form a subcommittee, which could be a joint subcommittee with members of the RPC to further deliberate and consider the item and try to really get at what problem are we trying to solve, and is there a way we can do it better? Because I don't really like either the other options right now. I don't think it actually solves a problem that I perceive. And since myself and Mr. Lawson here and Mr. Hartung have spoken out probably the loudest about this, I'd recommend the three of us representing the three jurisdictions. Beyond that, I haven't even talked to Mr. Hartung whatsoever, and I just a moment ago suggested to Mr. Lawson, so this might come as a surprise to them. But I just think we need some time in the bottle with the RPC to better understand and hear some affirmative presentations from the school board, talk about their challenges, the money issues, the timing issues, understand what we as elected officials are trying to cope with. And I just think we could profit from that. So, and maybe come back to this board with a little more fine-tuned recommendation. Oh.
Thank you, Ms. Dewar and Ms. Bybee.
I don't know that I agree. I'm
Okay.
looking at the options that were being presented.
Yeah.
And what it's really saying is by having the school district facilities plan that we're asking that you update every 5 years so that it is more current. And when you're doing it for 5 years, in that 5-year facilities plan would show the schools that you're planning to do now. Those would have to be in conformance. They would have to support population growth in regional form and be subject to the conformance review, which is kind of our checks and balance of does it meet what we need on the regional planning side? And then should a school, and on option 2, it says we set a map and the school district has schools that are planned out to the future. Those would all have to be in conformance when your facilities plan comes to us. And then if a development of a school comes outside of that and is not on the map, it would be deemed a project of regional significance, which would delay it, but would give us an opportunity to address that at that time. But I kind of feel like the facilities plan, if it's done every 5 years, and if it's in conformance, is doing what we're asking that hasn't happened before, that's giving us that checks and balance, but not, and I'm on capital funding too, big deal for me is the money. We're responsible for those taxpayer dollars. So I don't want to delay the school district on building something, but I also don't want the school district unnecessarily throwing things in, throwing a school in that is going to have a huge disruption on the community or the region, and we struggle with conformance. I think if it's set up and we abide by what this policy is, I think that helps protect us, and on the financial side, doesn't extend, the time frame that winds up costing more money. So I'm all about as much as we can streamline, as much as we can be most effective with the taxpayer dollars that we've been entrusted to protect as electeds, but also specifically on the capital funding protection committee too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I
Hartung?
should, I'm sorry, I was going to say, maybe I should say why I proposed this idea, what I thought the problem was. When the Regional Planning Commission considered our request for them to evaluate it, they, according to our legal counsel, because I wasn't there, maybe Kim was there, they were confused and they didn't understand why any change was needed, is what I kind of got. And we weren't there to have the conversation with them about the challenges that we're facing as elected officials, having improved developments. And this is, I want to give an example just from yesterday, and it's not opposed to what you're saying. And we may very well come back with, hey, how about item A? That works. That could very well be the outcome of the meeting. But yesterday, we were put in an awkward position, City Council, on our agenda was consideration of taking a piece of a park and using it to potentially build an elementary school. Now, I didn't know how I felt about it, and I felt it was a little unfair to the school board. Apparently, they had floated this idea some time ago. Suddenly, it showed up on our agenda. We had no briefing about it. We received literally hundreds of letters in a 3-day period. And that's how, it could have been on a plan that was adopted 7 years ago, I have no idea. So if it wasn't on a plan, it might have been a new project regional significance. But the point is what we're doing now is not really effective. And we want to avoid these feelings of crisis in the community that they have to be on the outlook at every moment because something might come creeping up on them that they weren't expecting. And 3 days later, we might approve a new school in them smack dab in their community and take away part of their park, and boom, we're done. Those I think are not good examples. And I'm not holding the school board responsible. I think it was proactive to start thinking about something. Why not? That's how you're supposed to do it. It's just probably how we handled it at the City of Reno, potentially, putting it on an agenda, which, council didn't know. I don't know how it all happened, but, and you didn't know. So that's the point, is like somewhere the ball got dropped. And I just want to be a little bit more affirmative. So I'm not saying anything negative about your idea, Commissioner Bybee, but I am saying I would like to delve into it a little bit more and see if there's some other things we can do too, so. Anyway.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dewar. Commissioner Hartung, did you have something?
I do, Madam Chair, thank you. And I have a tendency to agree with Councilwoman Dewar. My biggest concern is that we've got several cases where the fix now, and look, let's be clear, who pays for all infrastructure, whether it's schools or whether it's roads or whether it's any type of upgrade? It's Washoe County taxpayers, that's right. And so being proactive on the front side, which giving us this tool of a project of regional significance is, and at the end of the day, the fix, I keep using the example in Spanish Springs, the fix of Eagle Canyon now is probably about a $30 million ask, where it could have been done for potentially several $1 million up front. And so it's one of those things where we require, regardless of the entity, we require mitigation of impact. And that's really what we're talking about. And when you have very large schools that are now multi-jurisdictional, and in fact, I would tell you that there are very, very, very few schools, high schools and middle schools in Washoe County that are not multi-jurisdictional. There are some, I will grant that. But typically, even when you look at Mendive, there are pieces of unincorporated Washoe County up by what I'll always call Sparks Family Hospital that are unincorporated Washoe County. And so you have these, they're multi-jurisdictional, and I think it's an opportunity for us to look at these things, us corporately, and it's not to berate or castigate the Washoe County School District and try to put more costs on their back, but it's taking a more proactive look on the front side to say, look, how do we deal with this in a long-term fashion, and what are the issues? Because we know that schools, and this is something that's very different. And in fact, I noticed this in my own neighborhood. Just from the time my kids, 30 and 32 years old, when Spanish Springs Elementary School was built, you did not see anywhere near the amount of traffic on Sky Ranch Boulevard and the adjoining streets because a lot of kids walked. My kids walked every day. The kids in the neighborhood walked every single day. And now they don't walk. In fact, I see very few kids even riding their bikes. Their parents are taking them to school, and that's it's a consequence of what's happened in society. Parents are afraid. They're just afraid. And look, and I get it. And we've tried to band together as neighborhoods and try to make sure that kids have, safe walk routes and et cetera, and encourage walking and encourage bike riding. But at the end of the day, we're seeing more and more and more parents driving their kids to school. And that's the issue. And I would tell you that if you look at your transportation, you're probably seeing less ridership on your buses as well, because parents are driving their kids to school. It's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Commissioner
Madam
Hartung. Ms. Simon Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would it be possible if your motion is approved, and I don't know that it will be, but it's still on the table, for a representative of the school board to participate?
Yes.
Certainly as an elected official, it would be great to, even if I'm
Even
ex
3 people.
officio, I would,
I
yeah,
mean,
would
even,
appreciate it.
that would make it stronger, better. We could get to a better outcome, I think. Absolutely.
And I do think, if I might, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
I do think that there may be something between the
Yeah.
ends of this continuum. We need something that's stronger than just what we have now in facilities planning. I absolutely agree with that. And we need it to happen more regularly and more frequently with more scrutiny. There need to be more elements in it that are looked at. But project of regional significance, as it currently stands in statute, is too late in the process
Right.
to make it financially effective for the people of the county. So I think there may be a hybrid that
Yeah.
we could come up with, and it may even require legislation. I don't know. Mr. Acevedo will certainly be the expert on that, but I would be happy to participate and would welcome the opportunity.
I think that personally would be fantastic, because I don't really want it to be this committee where you're having to present and we're deciding. This is not the goal. I mean, this is not an effective way to get at the issue. So I like it a lot. I appreciate the offer.
Thank you, Ms. Dewar, and also Ms. Simon Holland and Mr. Lawson.
So I think what we're getting at, and I don't care what we call it, is a more holistic approach. It's, because a high school, and as we've found out with Wild Creek, it doesn't just affect that property that it sits on. It affects miles around from where those students are coming from, to the point now where it's affecting a development where we may have to put another stoplight in. And then that kind of defeats some of the roundabout issues. So that's planning for the future that was not taken into consideration when the high school is being built, that we would have more of an insight to that at the city level. Now, one of the things we did with City of Sparks and with the agreement of the school district, because we did a development agreement for the Wild Creek High School. So we got a holistic approach. We got the traffic studies. We got all the things that up front that we needed to make a good choice on it. That'll come before council on the 28th. So the school going through, but I think there's those issues like Councilwoman Dewar saying, well, let's take a look at it. Just because we have a piece of property doesn't mean that that's the best piece of property to put in a neighborhood. And I agree that it affects at least 2 entities almost every single time. And that's why I think that it kind of belongs in this realm. And I'm happy to serve on that subcommittee to look at it. And it's not to be us against them, and I don't want that at all. I want us to do this as a group, as a community, as a region, because we all want the same thing. We want smart, educated, safe kids.
Thank you, our City Council Member Lawson. I can't keep them all straight.
I go with Mr. and Ms.
So we do have a motion and a second. So let me ask just a quick question of Ms. Simon Holland. Let's assume we go with the motion that's on the floor right now. Are there specific projects that are going to be negatively impacted timing-wise if we take the opportunity now to have a group, a representative from the school district and from each of the entities to meet with the RPC to kind of go through the issues?
And great question, and thank you for asking. No. We have, as you all know, 5 schools underway right now, and that will take us through the next, Pete, 4 or 5, Adam, 8 years? How long? Depends on what happens with population growth and enrollment. We're seeing population growth, but we're not seeing as much enrollment growth as we have in the past when the population increases because we've got huge demographic changes. So to answer your question, there won't be a disadvantage if we pursue this, assuming that it's not going to take 3 years to come up with a.
Assuming a few months, maybe 6 months at most to.
I don't know, Pete, do you want to, I'd ask Mr. Etchert just to make sure that I'm correct
Mr.
in my.
Etchert.
Pete
Please.
Etchart, Chief Operating Officer, Washoe County School District. To answer your question specifically, when we did the WC1 and all the projects were listed on there, we had 3 high schools, 3 middle schools, and 9 elementary schools that were listed on the ballot. Those 3 middle schools are under construction right now. The 3 high schools, actually Wild Creek was the first one. The next one coming will probably be many years down the road. So the proposal that was kind of put together by Regional Planning Commission talking about schools of over 800, even if you make it 1,200, whatever it is, it's going to be probably several years before we see a school that would be coming in front of you that would probably meet that criteria. So we have time. And we would welcome, as President Simon Holland said, actually having those discussions on what is the best policy for all of us involved.
Super, thank you, Mr. Etchert. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm glad President Simon Holland brought this up. Sky Ranch Middle School is a perfect example to this. They've built a school that a community will be built around. And so it has this completely different model in terms of traffic flows, and it's a great, and I wish we could do that all the time, but it does come under the heading of if you build it, they will come. Because, and I'm not trying to disengage the building of schools. There's no question having an elementary school within walking distance of my home has increased its value. There's just no question of that. Schools and churches and stores, those kinds of things, they make great neighborhoods. It's the reason why people want to move into a neighborhood. There's a school within walking distance. They love that. And when Spanish Springs Elementary School was built, we were excited as a family to have that within walking distance of us. So this whole idea is not, it truly is not to hobble the process. And so I think that there can be some triggers in terms of, when you retrofit a community with a school, then there's some major changes. That becomes a little more problematic, and you have to look at how do you deal with that from plopping a completely new kind of a facility into an existing community. So I too welcome having this conversation in a deeper fashion. I'd like to hear 2 things though before we move forward. 1, I'd like to hear some public comment if there is any, and 2, I'd like to hear the motion repeated. I'm sorry.
Okay, but before we repeat the motion, I'm sure we have some public comment. So let's open it, unless there's any other comments from any board members. Let's open it up to public comment.
We have Gail Miller, followed by Darla Lee.
Hi, Gail Miller, Sparks, Nevada. I do like your discussion. I like your proposed motion, and I would be supportive of that. Things that I would like you to look at, I've already heard, are things about size, traffic, existing neighborhoods, these kinds of things that have a huge impact on students, surrounding neighborhoods, the community as a whole, and people traveling through. And just throwing this out here, but I was kind of curious on the schools that were on WC1 and that are in the process of being built or looked at acquiring land. Are those on this facilities plan from 7 years ago? And if not, should they be looked at in some way? That's just the thought that I had. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
We have Darla Lee, followed by Wesley Griffin.
Good afternoon. Darla Lee for the record, Sparks, Nevada. Having had the last basically 2 years involved with Save Wild Creek, and I know that we're not making that an example, but I have to say that is an example of why we have are at the point where we are. And if having more oversight, as in the suggestions from Mr. and Mr. von Hartog and Mr. Lawson, I would certainly welcome that, because it would seem that our neighborhood has already been sacrificed, but at least in the future, I would hope that there would be a more oversight, not only for the expense of the schools and the traffic. Currently, we're looking at Sullivan within 1 mile from McCarran to El Rancho of having at least 3 roundabouts. So in my opinion, that doesn't seem to be mitigating traffic. However, again, that's I suppose it's going to be decided next week. But I would say for a school to be put into an established neighborhood, there certainly has to be more oversight. And I don't believe that's been the case. And if a facility plan is something that the school board takes on itself with all of its expertise, and it is not really being reviewed by you folks or by some kind of committee, then the citizens lose. And I think that's, not to mention students, because having a brand new school is not what we need for education necessarily. It is certainly a factor, but upgrading our educational curriculum and our system is what is going to educate our students to become good citizens, in my opinion. So I would certainly encourage the oversight. I hope that this comes to pass, because it is important. It's important for neighborhoods. It's important for the students, and for our community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Have Wesley Griffin, followed by Tammy Holtstill.
Good afternoon, Wesley Griffin. I'm one of the managing partners of Save Wild Creek LLC. And as Darla just mentioned, our life has been greatly impacted by not having more oversight into some of these projects. So we very much are in favor of seeing things like this be subject to a planning process like the making this a project of regional significance. One of the books that really impacted my life early in life was when I was going to junior high and high school. The Cuban crisis was going on. I don't know if probably most of you don't remember that. I do. And one of the books that that I really enjoyed during that time was a book by Ernest Hemingway called For Whom the Bell Tolls. Probably most of you read it. If you haven't, go read it. It's a good book. But one of the things even more important than that was a poem that was in the beginning of the book. And essentially, the poem talked about how no man is an island. We are citizens, and we're no island. You may think that somehow because we live over next to Wild Creek, that somehow this just affects us, but it affects every one of us. Our regional plan says that we're supposed to be trying to preserve green space and recreational areas. Where's our next public park going to be here in our area? We're growing exponentially. Why are we cannibalizing our green spaces and recreational areas? And now I hear, I hadn't heard of this, there's another, the school district was trying to put another school in another public park. Is this where we're going? We have a housing community crisis right now, affordable housing. What's next on the agenda? Public parks? Is it okay to have lots of housing, plenty of places to stay, but no place for people to go out and enjoy green spaces? I think not. One of the things I find kind of interesting, I don't know if you can see this or not, or if you can turn that on.
They'll put it up for you.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I'll just hold it up. You've probably all seen the, there we go. Well, that's too big, I guess.
No, they'll make it smaller, but you just need to keep turning.
I'm sorry?
Just need to keep turning it so that, one more turn, there you go. And then they can zoom in on it or whatever.
Well, this is just
Zoom out.
a license plate that the city of Reno put out. It's almost disingenuous. Here we're talking support parks and recreation. Reno is within a rock's throw of, say, Wild Creek. And now we're letting this asset worth probably $30–40 million be consumed for something that could be placed elsewhere. And I hear now that it's happening in other parks. This needs to be paid attention to.
Thank you, Mr. Wesley. Appreciate you being here. I mean, Mr. Griffin. Thank you very much.
We
Any-
have Tammy Holdstill.
Tammy Holdstill.
Somebody's phone. Tammy Holtstill for the record. I've been paying attention to the agenda, so I've been seeing what's been happening, and I was very shocked and very upset when I heard and saw that the Washoe County School District was going to go into another open space. I'm glad to see the city of Reno decided, yeah, let's back off of that for the moment. I thought that was the right thing to do, and I applaud you guys for it. I think that any school, no matter how many kids go to it, needs to be looked at when it comes to the Washoe County School District. They think they are their own island. And at this point, you are regional. You are the mothership by the NRS standards. It's time for you guys to take control of the situation and build our area properly. Make sure we have all the right infrastructure in place, whether it's traffic. I know sewer is a big issue all the way around this county. And that needs to be addressed before you can go any further. Every toilet accounts for something, and we need to know where it's going. So it comes back to, like I said in the very beginning, I felt the boards that are here are the fox guarding the hen house. But maybe the foxes have finally decided that they need to really protect the hen house instead of knit and pick and choose and make wheels and deals in the background to get things through that they think are better than anything else. We need to be doing the right things. And it's time to start doing that. And I appreciate what you guys are doing. I think this oversight is going to be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holstill. Anyone else?
We have no more on this item.
Okay, anyone else in the audience? We will close public comment, bring it back to the board. So I believe there's been a request to restate the motion. And
No
if you
problem.
would, please add Commissioner
I'm going
Hartung to the motion
So I'm
also.
going to amend my motion a little bit to say, I make a motion that the Regional Planning Governing Board form a subcommittee to meet jointly with the Regional Planning Commission to further deliberate and consider the concept of how to best plan for schools and come up with some recommendations to bring those back to this board. And I further propose that the members of the subcommittee be myself, Mr. Hartung, Mr. Lawson, and Ms. Simon Holland.
Does the seconder wish to second the?
I'm sorry. Seconder agrees.
Okay.
I apologize.
All right, any more
I just wanted the base language, that's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, we've done public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Yay.
Good job, everybody. Thank you. Madam Director, Ms. Robinson, Ms. President.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 6, reports. 6A for possible action, members and directors' reports. If there are no members' reports, I will do a small director's report, which is full of good news. So I'd like to report that we have good progress on the regional plan update. We are currently working with the jurisdictions. We've almost finished working through, our regional form items. We have a draft 3 for our tiering map. And we, in 2 weeks, are having the engineers from Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County join us at our working group meeting to continue to move forward on public infrastructure. So I'd like to say that we are really pleased with movement and moving forward, and this has just been all great stuff. Your next regularly scheduled meeting is for June 13th, 2019. A couple of items you can look forward to talking about include the completed fiscal year 17-18 audit and a geothermal plant. Thank you. A 6B for possible action, legal counsel's report.
All right,
Thank you. I have nothing further.
nothing further? Okay. And how about Ms. Simon Holland? Do you have a report? Okay, so no report there. Any members who have additional comments or report they'd like to give? Seeing Mr. Lawson, Commissioner, Councilman Lawson,
Councilman, Commissioner,
whatever.
hey, you, I answered it all. I think something we should maybe talk about in the future is making Washoe County a permanent member of the regional planning, since they do drive a lot of what we do.
The school
And
district.
having this, excuse me. Did you say, you didn't say, hey, you?
I knew what he was saying.
That's right. So it's to make the school district, I mean, I don't know what that's gonna take. I think we gotta change the law, but it's something I think we should look into.
Okay.
So we do get a more collaborative effort there.
Are
I
you
think that's
suggesting a voting member? Is that? Yes.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, we will close that. Any other requests for future agenda items? We have one final public comment.
Yes, we have one, Ms. Tammy Holdstill.
Ms. Holdstill?
Tammy Holdstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. Again, like I said, by statute, you are the mothership. I went and did a lot of learning in NRSs to find out that. And now, as I was in front of you again, it's time for infrastructure to be addressed. It is very important that STEM-WARF, STED, and TUM-WARF, we know that with all of the development that is happening, especially your affordable housing that you guys are looking at, that you are going to have to do something about your facilities. And with that being the case, there are things that can be done instead of spending money in ideas and, changing floodplains when FEMA is the one that needs to be doing that, and put that on FEMA's shoulders, not on the county's shoulders, is where money should be spent at. Permanent fixtures for permanent processing is what needs to be done. A+ water should be all the way through this county. Period, end of story. I agree with Mr. Hartong. It should be A+. This way you're not affecting people down the road like Swan Lake is. Oh yeah, it's recreational proof? I wouldn't want to go put my big toe in it. So there's a lot of things that need to be done, and we need to work together to get it done and not be spending money on trying to put affluent over in Honey Lake and those kinds of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment?
No more.
All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there any written correspondence?
There is none.
All right, I am looking for a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.